When we go through heartbreak, it can feel like something inside us has shattered. The natural instinct is to internalize that pain and assume it's because something is wrong with us. Maybe we weren't enough, maybe we were too much, maybe we trusted too soon or held on too long. And in that swirl of self-doubt, we start to believe that being hurt means we're somehow broken. But that's not the truth. The very fact that you feel so deeply after a breakup isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of depth. You loved. You opened your heart to someone. You let someone see the parts of you that most people never do. That's not brokenness. That's bravery. There are people who never allow themselves to feel that kind of connection. They stay guarded. They play it safe. They avoid attachment so they can avoid pain. But what they're really avoiding is intimacy, growth, and emotional richness. So, if you're hurting after a heartbreak, it's because you gave something real. And that's not something to be ashamed of. In fact, if you never felt pain, that would mean you never truly cared. The emotional residue that lingers after love is gone is a reminder that your heart was genuinely invested. You showed up fully, and that's powerful. The pain doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're human. We live in a world that tries to convince us to shut down, to toughen up, to pretend we're unaffected. But what if the opposite is true? What if your ability to feel that pain is actually one of your greatest strengths? And here's something important to realize. People often confuse being wounded with being weak. A wound means you experience something impactful, but wounds heal. Scars don't mean damage, they mean survival. They are the markers of growth, experience, and resilience. So when you look at yourself post-heartbreak, don't see someone who's broken. See someone who's learning, someone who's evolving. Every time you choose to be vulnerable, despite the possibility of pain, you're choosing life. You're choosing meaning. And the more you lean into that, while also protecting your standards and boundaries, the more you grow into the kind of person who doesn't just survive heartbreak, but transforms because of it. Loving deeply is not a flaw. It's not a weakness to be corrected. It's a rare quality in a world full of fear and ego. It's something to be honored. So instead of carrying shame for the fact that you loved someone who hurt you, carry pride. Pride in the fact that your heart works, that it loves, and that it's still beating, because you're not broken. You're just in the middle of becoming even more beautifully whole. We often hear the phrase, "It just takes time to heal." And while that's comforting, it can also be misleading. Time helps, yes, but it doesn't guarantee healing. Healing doesn't happen just because days turn into weeks or months. Healing happens because you actively participate in your recovery. You make choices, small, uncomfortable, intentional choices, that lead you back to emotional freedom. If you simply wait, you might just end up waiting forever, still holding on to the same pain, the same unanswered questions, and the same narrative that keeps you stuck. Effort is what creates healing. It's the effort to sit with your feelings rather than run from them. The effort to stop romanticizing someone who caused you pain. The effort to rebuild your confidence, your self-esteem, and your peace of mind. And that effort isn't linear. Some days you'll feel like you're making progress, and then out of nowhere, a song, a memory, or a photo will pull you right back. That doesn't mean you're broken again. It means you're human. But even on those days, the decision to feel it instead of suppress it is part of the healing process. There's an emotional responsibility that comes with heartbreak. You can't control what someone else did to you, but you can control how you respond to it now. Are you going to use the pain to build walls, or are you going to use it to build wisdom? Are you going to live in fear, or are you going to live with higher standards? That choice is made every day in the little things, in the way you talk to yourself, in the way you set boundaries, in the way you remember the past, not just for its moments of love, but for the lessons it gave you. Effort-based healing also means reaching for better tools. Reading, journaling, therapy, conversations with people who truly see you. These are the things that help you process what you went through. These are the things that help you make meaning out of the mess. Healing requires energy because it's a form of emotional reprogramming. You're not just recovering from a person. You're recovering from the version of you that accepted less, that ignored red flags, that doubted their worth. That takes courage. That takes showing up for yourself even when it's hard. Time will pass no matter what. But healing only happens when you use that time intentionally. It's not about waking up one day magically over it. It's about waking up each day choosing not to let that pain define you, choosing to become stronger, smarter, softer, and more self-aware because of what happened, not in spite of it. When you start to heal through effort, you stop waiting for someone else to fix the damage, and you begin reclaiming your own power. That's when you begin to feel whole again. Not because time passed, but because you showed up for yourself while it did. One of the most overlooked parts of heartbreak is not just the pain of losing the person, but the pain of losing the fantasy we built around them. So often what we truly grieve isn't the relationship as it was, but the story we were telling ourselves about what it could become. We grieve the version of the future that was never real. We grieve the imagined milestones, the daydreams of happiness, the hope that this person would be the one who finally stayed, understood, or chose us in the way we longed for. When a relationship ends, especially one we were deeply invested in, we don't just experience sadness, we experience disorientation. That's because we built an emotional blueprint around that person. Maybe you pictured growing old with them. Maybe you imagined introducing them to your family, traveling the world, building a home. Those dreams weren't meaningless. They were built on real feelings. But when we don't separate the dream from the actual relationship, we often end up stuck, mourning an illusion that was never actually grounded in reality. It's not that the love wasn't real, but sometimes the version of the person we loved was. We fall for someone's potential, for what we thought they could become, or for who they were only in the beginning. We hold on, thinking if we just love harder, they'll return to that version. But that fantasy can become a trap, because while we wait for it to be real again, we stop seeing what's actually happening in front of us. The neglect, the misalignment, the lack of effort, the emotional unavailability, and yet the story in our head keeps pulling us back. To truly heal, we have to be willing to let go of both the person and the fantasy. We have to see the relationship as it was, not as we wished it to be. That means being honest with ourselves, not cruel, but honest. Were we constantly compromising? Were we hoping they would change? Were we dismissing our needs just to keep the peace? These questions are uncomfortable, but they bring clarity. And clarity is the foundation of emotional freedom. Once we grieve the fantasy, something shifts. We begin to reclaim our perspective. We stop idolizing someone who couldn't meet us where we needed to be met. We begin to see that it wasn't our fault. The fantasy didn't come true. It was simply that we were holding on to an idea instead of accepting the truth. Letting go of the fantasy doesn't mean the love wasn't meaningful. It means you're ready to make space for a love that's real. One that doesn't just live in your imagination, but one that shows up, aligns with your values, and meets you with equal effort. Grieving the fantasy is hard, but it's a powerful turning point. It's where healing deepens and where self-respect begins to rise. Because when you release the dream of who they could have been, you begin to reconnect with who you are. And that's where the real transformation begins. Love at its core is a risk. There is no way around it. The moment you decide to open your heart to someone, you're stepping into unknown territory. You're allowing yourself to be seen, to be affected, and to be vulnerable. And vulnerability means there's always a chance you could get hurt. But there's also a chance, maybe the most important chance, that something beautiful can grow. And here's the truth that most people run from. The only way to ever experience the depth of love is to accept the emotional risk that comes with it. We often try to avoid that risk by building walls, by becoming more cautious, more guarded, more logical in love. We tell ourselves we'll only open up when it's safe, when we have guarantees, when the other person has proven they're not going to leave. But love doesn't work that way. There is no perfect moment when every risk disappears. Emotional safety isn't built before love. It's built through love, slowly, with trust and consistency. And to even begin that process, you have to be willing to be emotionally exposed. Emotional risk is the price of emotional reward. You don't get the kind of love that nourishes your soul without taking that leap. You don't get deep connection while staying completely guarded. And this is what scares people after heartbreak. They remember how painful it was when it didn't work out. They remember the betrayal, the disappointment, the abandonment. So they associate vulnerability with danger. But avoiding vulnerability isn't the solution. It's just another form of emotional imprisonment. You may protect yourself from pain, but you also block yourself from joy, intimacy, and growth. Real love doesn't come with guarantees, but it does come with patterns. If you're growing, if you've done the work, if you've developed your ability to communicate, set boundaries, and trust your intuition, then yes, you are still taking a risk, but it's an informed one. You're not the same person who got hurt before. You're wiser now. You recognize red flags faster. You listen to your gut more. You don't lose yourself trying to keep someone else. So even though the risk is still there, your response to that risk is more grounded. Some people wait their entire lives trying to protect their heart from ever feeling pain again. And in doing so, they miss out on the kind of love that's only possible when you show up fully. You can't half love and expect to be fully loved in return. So if you're wondering whether it's worth it to risk opening up again, ask yourself this. Are you willing to trade emotional safety for emotional depth? Because at the end of the day, the greatest moments of love come not when everything is certain, but when you choose to lean in despite the uncertainty. And when you do, when you love with your eyes open and your feet on the ground, the reward is not just another person. It's the version of you who shows up brave, whole, and ready. That's the person who attracts real love. That's the person who turns risk into reward. One of the most important and overlooked steps after heartbreak is rebuilding self-trust. So many people rush into a new relationship hoping to feel safe again, to feel wanted, to feel like they matter. But if you haven't rebuilt trust within yourself, no relationship, no matter how kind, stable, or promising, can give you lasting peace. Because real emotional safety doesn't come from someone else being predictable. It comes from knowing that you will show up for yourself no matter what happens. When we go through a painful breakup, especially one where we ignored red flags, compromised too much, or lost ourselves trying to keep someone, it's not just trust in others that's damaged. It's our trust in our own judgment. We think, how did I not see it? Or why did I stay so long? Or how can I ever trust myself again not to choose wrong? These questions eat away at our self-confidence, and if we don't address them, they quietly influence every future decision we make in love. Rebuilding self-trust starts with honesty. It means taking responsibility without shame. You begin asking better questions. Not just why did this happen to me, but what patterns did I overlook? Where did I abandon my own needs? What part of me thought this was the best I could get? These are not easy questions, but they're powerful. Because when you answer them, you begin to reconnect with your own inner guidance system. You begin to remember that you do know what's right for you. You just have to start listening again. Self-trust is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming aware. It's about learning to recognize when your boundaries are being crossed and having the strength to enforce them. It's about choosing someone, not because they make you feel temporarily high, but because they align with your values, your standards, and your peace. That awareness is what makes you powerful. Not guarded, but strong. When you trust yourself, you don't need to fear falling for the wrong person again, because you know you'll walk away if it's not right. It also means showing up consistently for yourself in small ways. The promises you keep to yourself matter. When you say you'll stop checking their social media, and you follow through, that's self-trust. When you say you'll take space instead of responding emotionally to a triggering text, and you do, that's self-trust. The more you keep these promises, the more your self-respect grows. And from that place, you begin to feel emotionally solid again. Not because you're waiting for someone else to protect your heart, but because you are protecting it wisely and lovingly. Ultimately, self-trust is the foundation of any healthy relationship. Without it, you'll constantly question yourself, overanalyze your partner's every move, and live in fear of repeating the past. With it, you become emotionally grounded. You stop chasing validation. You stop tolerating emotional crumbs, and you open your heart again, not because you need someone to save you, but because you're already whole. One of the most transformative realizations you can have after heartbreak is that your standards are not just boundaries. They are reflections of your self-worth. When we're in the depths of emotional pain, it's tempting to settle, to accept breadcrumbs of affection, to rationalize inconsistency, to believe that just being loved even a little is enough. But that mindset doesn't lead to healing. It leads to emotional compromise where your heart is always negotiating its needs for the sake of someone else's comfort. Heartbreak gives you a choice to shrink or to strengthen. To lower your standards out of fear of being alone, or to raise them because you finally understand what you deserve. The mistake people often make is thinking that higher standards mean fewer chances at love. But the truth is, higher standards filter out the noise, the confusion, the half-efforts, the emotional chaos, and make room for quality connections. You're not making it harder to find love. You're making it easier to find love that lasts. Standards are not about being rigid or unkind. They're about clarity. They're about saying, I know how I want to be treated, and I won't settle for less. Not because I'm hard to please, but because I've been through enough to know what doesn't work. After a heartbreak, you gain wisdom. You gain insight into what kind of love depletes you, and what kind of love energizes you. That awareness should translate into new standards, more emotionally mature conversations, more honesty, more follow-through, more respect for your time and heart. Sometimes we think that setting high standards will scare people away, and it will, but only the people who were never willing to meet them in the first place. That's not rejection, that's redirection. It's your future self being protected. And when someone does come along who aligns with your values, who meets your standards not as a burden, but as a natural extension of who they are, that's when you experience peace. You don't have to chase, beg, or shrink. You simply receive because you made space for the right connection. Elevating your standards after heartbreak also requires you to do the work yourself. You can't expect someone else to bring consistency, communication, and respect if you're not embodying those qualities too. You attract at the level of your own self-respect. So raising your standards isn't just about what you want from others. It's about who you're becoming in the process. It's about becoming someone who no longer entertains temporary love when they're looking for something lasting. The greatest act of self-love you can make after heartbreak is to say, I've learned from the past. I'm not bitter. I'm better. And I won't lower my standards just to avoid being alone. I will raise them to make sure the next time I love, it's healthy, mutual, and grounded in real compatibility. Because you're not just trying to heal, you're trying to build something stronger. And that starts with honoring your worth through the standards you choose to live by. Letting go of the past isn't just about moving on from a person, it's about moving on from a version of yourself that existed in that relationship. When we go through heartbreak, we often stay emotionally tied to the identity we had with that person. We remember who we were when we loved them, how we showed up, how much we gave, and sometimes how much of ourselves we lost in the process. And even when the relationship ends, a part of us can remain frozen in that story, clinging to the pain, the hope, or the guilt. But healing begins when you make the conscious decision to stop reliving the past and start reclaiming your future. That means no longer replaying every conversation in your head, no longer stalking their social media trying to decode their life, and no longer romanticizing a connection that didn't meet your needs. It's about stepping out of emotional survival mode and stepping into self-awareness. The longer you stay stuck in the past, the more you delay the version of yourself that is waiting to be born on the other side of this pain. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean the relationship was meaningless or that you were foolish for loving. It means you've accepted the reality that the chapter is over, and holding on to it is no longer serving your growth. One of the hardest truths we face in love is that someone can mean everything to us at one point, but not be the person meant to stay. And when we resist that truth, we end up prolonging our suffering, trying to resuscitate something that our soul already knows is done. To let go, you must detach from the belief that healing is about getting back what you lost. Healing is not about going backward, it's about building forward. That starts with reconnecting to your values, your joy, your boundaries, and your vision for love. Who are you when you're not loving someone else more than yourself? Who are you when your energy isn't being poured into saving a relationship, but into building a life that fulfills you? Those are the questions that move you forward. Forgiveness plays a role here too. Not necessarily for them, but for yourself. Forgive yourself for not knowing better at the time. Forgive yourself for loving fully, even if it wasn't returned the way you deserved. Letting go is easier when you stop punishing yourself for the past, and instead, honor it as a season that taught you something vital about who you are and what you need. Eventually, you'll realize that your future is too valuable to keep carrying the emotional weight of a relationship that's already behind you. You don't have to hate the past to let it go. You just have to love yourself enough to stop living in it. When you finally release the old story, you create space for a new one where you are the main character again, and love, when it comes next, doesn't have to heal you. It just gets to meet you already whole. When you're finally ready to open your heart again after heartbreak, the fear of vulnerability can feel paralyzed. There's a natural instinct to protect yourself, to scan for danger, to expect disappointment, because you've already lived through the pain of someone not choosing you, or worse, choosing to hurt you. But here's the truth. Opening your heart again doesn't mean doing it blindly. It means doing it intentionally. And that intention begins with a new kind of communication, one rooted in honesty, self-awareness, and emotional courage. You don't have to pretend to be unbothered. You don't have to put on an armor of indifference just to appear strong. Real strength is being able to say, this is where I've been, this is what I've learned, and this is what I need moving forward. Communicating openly about your values, your pace, your emotional boundaries, and your non-negotiables isn't a burden. It's a filter. It shows the right people how to love you, and it shows the wrong people that they're not ready to step up. Most of us are taught that early love should be light and easy, that we shouldn't bring up anything heavy too soon. But if you've done the work to heal, then your approach to love isn't naive anymore. It's intentional. You're not here to repeat old patterns. You're here to create a relationship that matches your growth. And that kind of relationship requires emotional transparency from the beginning. Not oversharing out of fear or trying to trauma bond, but speaking from a place of grounded self-respect. Here's who I am now. Here's what matters to me. And here's how I move in love. Intentional communication is also about listening, not just to their words, but to their consistency, their emotional availability, their effort. When you open your heart again, do it with eyes wide open. Pay attention to the little signs, how they handle conflict, how they respond to your boundaries, how they show up when things aren't convenient. These things speak louder than grand gestures, and you get to communicate through your actions too. By not chasing, not settling, and not ignoring the truth just because you want to feel chosen. One of the most beautiful outcomes of heartbreak is that it can strip away the illusions. You start to realize that love isn't just about chemistry or butterflies. It's about compatibility, character, and emotional maturity. When you begin to open your heart again, do it knowing that you're not seeking someone to fix or fill you. You're not looking for love to make you whole. You're already whole, you're simply looking for someone to walk beside you, not carry you. So speak up. Ask the deeper questions, share your intentions, let your clarity guide you. The right person won't be intimidated by your truth, they'll be drawn to it. And that's how you begin again, not by trying to protect yourself from love, but by creating a love that doesn't require protection. After heartbreak, opening your heart again isn't about rushing into love or ignoring the lessons you've learned. It's about rebuilding from a place of strength, clarity, and self-respect. You've faced the pain of losing not just a person, but a dream. And you've come to understand the difference between fantasy and reality. You've learned that vulnerability is a necessary risk to experience deep connection. And that rebuilding self-trust is essential to protect your heart wisely. By raising your standards, you honor your worth and create space for love that truly serves you. Letting go of the past frees you to embrace your future with hope and intention. And when you open your heart again, you do so with honesty, courage, and clarity, ready to create a love that reflects the growth you've made. This journey isn't just about finding someone new. It's about becoming the person who attracts the love you deserve. Your heart is ready, your future is waiting. And love, real healing and fulfilling love, is possible once more.